Oh, they're on the okay, they're on this. Yeah, they're on this. Okay.
That link, that's all that.
Yep, the Zoom link. Yep, I got people in here already, I think. I'm not mistaken. I think I'm doing this right. I'm trying to. Yep, that is real beer. Local black. It's a pop.
You got one? You got something?
I do. Oh, let me see. What do I have to do here? I need to go to. Here's the actual zone. Right. Okay, here I am. Remove. Base, man. Okay, sounds good. Yep, it's already up. It's running. It's running. We good. We got it. It's going good. Okay. So my biggest the actual system is working. Like the Zooms look good. What's up, bro? How you doing?
You hype? How you feeling?
Bro, I'm just a little anxious, ready to get going, ready to feel it. You know what I'm saying? Hot. It looked like it's working. Look like everything is good. Cause like
yes,
and
we recording too. Looks like.
Yeah, we recording every second. We already recording. So
okay, let's get it.
Got 18 minutes countdown. And as we already got 10 people, 12 people from the conference waiting to get in.
That's what's up.
So we'll let them in. I'll let in the participants as y'all come in. I'm going back and forth, changing clothes and stuff.
Right. So the paint and sip starts right after?
Yeah, 6:30.
6:30 until when?
8. We'll be up here at DeLaSalle. It's gonna be people here live in the room.
Right. My son, I'm going to a basketball game. My son in town.
I saw that. Yeah. How's he doing?
He good. You see, we going to Indiana.
I saw that. Was that his announcement with the hoodie on like that?
Oh no, he did it. Man, go Google his name and you'll see his announcement. It was much bigger than that.
Oh, okay, good. I'm gonna go have to watch it. I'm still trying to troubleshoot. Here we go. Helen, once you get that set up, I'll still have a couple people that are looking to get there. Actually, I can do it right here. I'm sitting right here. I got it. I'm one of the attendees. Willis Shim. Attendees. Hey, how's it going, Jeff? Did they get you uploaded over there? Okay.
And those questions seem all superintendent based. Well, is she gonna leave some other stuff in there for us district leaders?
I think we can talk about that before we. Oh, I mean, and for like district, yeah, I think so. I think that's something that you can note as we virtual event, attendee portal. Address that when we all get in the room. I think that's something that we can talk about before we get started in the 10 minutes beforehand. Because those final three were a me and Gloria thing. You know what I'm saying? So I think that'd be something for you to like. I'll give space in the last 5 minutes for like any final pieces of feedback or anything people want to say about the questions, and you can use that space for that. This is just you calling me. Where's my phone, bro? Yeah, this my computer. My phone's right here.
Oh, other table? Is that it?
Can we turn some lights on so people can see the food over there? Hey Q, where are the lights? Lights? Can we turn some lights on?
Oh, good. Nice. These have low sugar in them. I'm not sure. That's just bottles.
I think the one might be sweet.
Oh, it's sparkling, so it must be like that have a low sugar.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure what.
Does the greens have pork in it? Because I don't eat pork.
Yeah, so
I'll
here's
just take
white,
one.
or there's also red. I'm not sure what the sugar content of them. Alcohol is always so bad at. So bad to me.
Does this have a lot of sugar in it?
I don't know. I think the whites are better, are less sweet. The blancos are less sweet than the rosés.
Do you know if the greens have pork in it?
Oh, I don't know. Most likely some black beer. Oh, cool.
Either one.
But I like this.
You can do a wardrobe change. I probably will. Well, I'm only gonna be on stage once. I brought something else. I brought something else.
Hey, how's it going?
Have you met Helen yet?
Yeah.
Oh, duh. Y'all did
Only
work
worked
together
here
that
for the
time.
past
Yeah,
2 weeks.
sorry.
Right when we ran our cottage industry of packing up canvases.
Sorry, guys. It's been a long.
It's totally fine. So are you gonna do a live art demo? Oh, amazing.
Here's Gloria.
I'm doing it in here. I didn't know that.
I'll make Gloria the host. Hello, Dr. Ladson Billings.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well, jumping from one platform to the next.
Oh, that's not what I want to do. Okay. Can you make me back the host? I just made you the
You
host.
look good in that pink, Miss Billings.
You know what other meeting I'm in, right?
I already know. You
You already
got the
know.
pearls. You locked in.
I'm locked in. My chapter just won an award for my work, so I'm excited. So let me see.
Wow.
I got it, Miss Ladson Billings. Sorry.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Sorry.
No, that's my fault. I didn't know I could reclaim it. This is my sister, Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, good.
Good. I used some of your work in my dissertation. I'm honored to meet you virtually.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
She'll be doing the sip and paint after that we're doing here live.
Okay, good.
So you all also probably have, as speakers, you have registration capabilities or attendee capabilities. So you can just hop in the feed loop after this and watch us and hang out. There's gonna be some live music and some spoken word from students and some painting as well.
Oh, great. Unfortunately, I got to get back to my other meeting.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you taking some time out for us.
Sure.
We got about 11 minutes left. Like I said, there are people from the conference already in here waiting on us, and we'll open the doors at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
Dr. Ladson Billings, just final logistics wise, did you see the email where like, I don't
Yep,
want to
I
do
got it right
like,
in front of me. You want me to just welcome people
Yep,
and tell them what we're doing and why.
yep. I don't need to be a part of this at all. I'll hop in at 6:30 to be able to direct people to the next event or to the next thing. But I just would like your face and these gentlemen to be shining in this moment.
Okay, sounds good.
So I'm gonna go ahead and hop off, since the host is here, hop off screen and mute myself. I'll continue to let people in,
Okay.
and I'll hop back on screen when we're about to go live. And wish you all well. What's up, Dr. Johnson?
Hey, how's it going, brother?
All right.
Dr. Ladson, Billings, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
EJ, what's up, brother?
What's going on, man? How you feeling?
I can't complain.
I heard that. I heard that.
Long day. Gonna be a longer weekend because I'm gonna take
Bro,
my time.
It's been a nice long weekend, man, but still blessed.
Yes, sir.
What time's your first session tomorrow morning?
Ooh, 10, 15, I think 10.
Is that you and Jones?
Yeah, me and Jones. What about you?
I'm not doing any additional sessions. I was supposed to be out of town in Columbia this week.
Okay. What was happening up there?
We got Missouri Scholars 100, so I was supposed to be up there for that, but my the two guys who received it are not going, so I don't have to go anymore.
Cool. You stay connected with ZA?
Yep. Every now and then, man, like those brothers, like I don't know. It's a different world now.
I'm still advising Rotator.
Are you?
Ooh, you talking about work? Putting in
I'm
that
trying
work.
to get out of it. I'm trying to get out of it.
I'm
They keep pulling me back.
on the grad advisors council, but that's as much. I refuse to be the grad advisor.
I've been a grad advisor for my chapter, my college chapter, for 17 years.
Oh no, that's too long. I agreed to be on the council because I was on the campus, and I'm like, y'all know I'm retired now, so y'all should let me go. No,
Right.
you got more time.
And I think I'm the only reason I was advisor because I'm the closest one to the chapter. Driving this, everybody else in St. Louis, Minnesota,
Yeah.
Atlanta. So I'm the closest one.
Yeah. No, we just did over 23,000 reactivations this year
Goodness gracious.
across the country.
Wow.
And another 1,255 new members.
Wow.
In your chapter?
No. This is the sorority.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nationwide. Got you. Okay.
That's the Camela benefit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Now everybody want to pay their dues. Mhm.
Everybody.
Yeah, sure.
So I was this close to moving to Madison.
Oh, really?
So Shaka Smart got the job at Marquette. My son was going to Texas.
Mm-hmm.
He decommitted when Shaka left.
Okay.
And we was this close. And we recording too. It was this close, but we ended up going to Indiana.
It's a good conference. He'll be fine. He'll be just fine. And he's got a new coach there too. I used to be the Big Ten faculty rep, so I done been on every last one of them campuses.
Nice.
I know where all the bones, the skeletons are buried. I know who ain't worth a white quarter. I know all of them. We're looking for a new AD, so that's going to be interesting. The Barry finally letting it go.
Yes, I understand. Dr. Strickland.
Dr. Bates, good to see
man?
you, man. Good to see you, good man. Good to see you.
You looking very superintendent-ish.
Hey, man, I had to dress the part today. I was in uniform today. I had a couple meetings where, I didn't want them to throw me out because I had to get in uniform. Hey, good to see you, Dr. Jones and Dr. Ladson. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Oh, my pleasure. Good to see you
Hello.
Good to see you all.
Hey, Jay, Dr. Billings is a soror.
Oh, well, I am happy to meet a soror. And
I'm just telling you, I'm popping in and out of the Central Region meeting, so I just left. I wanted to hear the membership report because I'm the membership chair in my own, and membership is skyrocketing.
Oh, you covering it all. You covering it all. There's another good man right there, Dr. Bedell. How you see?
Hey, everybody! I'm on. Finally
Okay,
made it.
good.
Right
Well,
on,
we're
Dr.
going to be
Bedell.
live in about 6 minutes, so
Okay.
Cornell will not be on screen until the end of our session.
Okay. Sounds like a plan.
And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to take the time to introduce you because we have 1 hour and that thing's going to go like that.
Right.
Your job will be to introduce yourself when you answer the question. Okay.
You have 90. We have 90 minutes, Dr. Billings. We go from 5 to 6:30.
Oh, 5 to 6:30. Okay, but still, it's going to go fast. It's going to go fast.
And I saw those 3 questions seem to be more pointed at the superintendents. The first question, which was describe your journey, obviously all of us can answer.
Right.
And I'm fine with how the questions are set up. But I just noticed that the second question was difference between superintendent and principal and advice to inspire school leaders.
Okay, well,
Hey,
I'll
Anthony Lewis
work
is trying
it
to get in, y'all.
Use my time.
Dr. Billings, can you let Anthony Lewis in?
I'm not.
Anthony, what's going on? I got him on speaker here.
I'm looking for him right now. I don't see him in.
Cornell is doing that. He's.
I don't see him. I don't see Dr. Lewis in here.
Hey, Cornell, make me and Keith co-hosts.
So did you not get a link in your calendar for it?
Yeah, I clicked on that link.
He's on the Zoom link.
What the video where Cornell is speaking. Let me try this one right here.
He's not. He shouldn't be on the feed loop. He should be
You
on
should
the Zoom
look
link.
for a link that you got at 3.
Oh, here he is. I got him. Here he is.
All right, good. All I try to do is help a little. That's all I try to do. All right.
Just doing your part.
Yes.
So for that superintendent versus principal question, what I would suggest is that when you answer it, who is it that's not a superintendent? Dr. Bates?
Jones,
Talk.
Johnson.
Wait a minute, but somebody's not working schools, right?
That's Rodney, Dr. Smith.
Oh, Dr. Smith. Okay.
Well,
So
he's
what
in higher ed.
Higher ed.
Yeah.
So what I would say for that question, take it on as the difference in higher ed leadership. Most people don't understand like the difference between what does it mean to be a dean, what does it mean to be a provost. So take it where you need to take it for your institution.
And here's Rodney, so he may be able to speak to that as well, because he's working in higher ed. And I think that that's something that we talked about last time too, Dr. Ladson Billings, is how to bring in his perspective and to make sure that that also is part of the conversation.
Right.
Okay, guys, 2 minutes.
Okay.
Hey, Rodney.
Grievances?
Rodney.
Yes, sir. Rodney wearing purple.
With all that purple and gold stuff back there.
That's what I was about to. That's my grievance. That's my grievance. Oh, okay, black collar. Okay.
Oh, okay. I thought I saw some Q-Dog stuff back there.
Well,
it is. I see it.
Oh, yeah, you see that in the back.
Now, gentlemen, you do understand I am the 2017 International Citizen of the Year for Omega Psi Phi. You do know that, right?
Oh,
look at that.
You do know that, right?
Okay.
They had to go get an AKA to be the
Couldn't find a
International
Delta.
Citizen of the Year.
Couldn't find a Delta to do it.
Couldn't find them. They looked at my stuff and said, "Woo, no, she the one."
Okay.
I tease them because the pin is in 2 parts. It says Citizen of the Year, and then it has 2017. I don't wear the 2017 part. I said, I'm y'all Citizen of the Year for life. Life till I resign.
That's a boss move there. That's a boss move, Doc.
Right.
No question.
Okay, we are 1 minute away. So once we turn to 5, I'm going to probably do a 5 count.
All right, how do we know who's viewing? Where is that at? Is that on the feed loop side?
Yeah, that's Cornell. He says he's got people that he's going to be admitting at 5.
Okay.
Yep, I got 32 people ready to get let in. So I'm about to admit all. I'm gonna go ahead and let them all in right now. Y'all ready?
Okay.
Do it.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, good evening. My name is Gloria Ladson Billings, and I'm from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I am so delighted to serve as your moderator for today's session. One of the things I'm going to ask you is just a little bit of Zoom etiquette. Please, if you are not on our panel, we ask that you would place yourself on mute. Even though you may not intend to speak, you may have some background noise, and so we want to make sure that we get to hear our speakers. I'm so delighted to serve as moderator for this panel as a part of the LiberatED program. We're looking at what's happening with what happens when you have liberated Black men who do this work in education. And we have a wonderful panel for you today. We're going to make sure that we get the most out of this panel because we don't have a ton of time. We got 90 minutes, but you will be surprised at how quickly 90 minutes goes when we are having a conversation of this level. I do want to just remind us that we're having this panel just a few days after we heard a verdict in the case of an officer. I'm not going to say his name because I'm not giving him any publicity, but an officer in Minneapolis for the savage murder of Brother George Floyd. And I know that if you're like me, you weren't joyful about that verdict, but you were relieved. We know that the Floyd family has not received justice. They've received some level, as the Attorney General of Minnesota said, of accountability. They haven't received justice. Justice would be the restoration of their loved one. But I want to kind of start there because the place that George Floyd did not receive justice was not just on the streets of Minneapolis. George Floyd did not receive justice in our schools. George Floyd did not receive the kind of education that would allow him the kind of freedom and flexibility to be able to negotiate and navigate aspects of this system. So because those of us who are educators didn't fully do our work and our jobs, in some ways we are complicit. We are complicit. And so I would, just hope that we would make a commitment that there be no more. Now, of course, I'm saying this after Dante Wright was killed in the middle of the trial, after Adam Toledo was killed in the middle of the trial, and after Ma'Khia Bryant was killed on the day that the verdict was rendered. But I just want to remind each and every one of us in this field of education that we have a part in this, that there's stuff that we are not doing that is not rendering justice to our young people. Okay, so with that, I want to get started. I'm going to ask each of our panelists, when you respond to the question, just give your name and your work, the job that you are doing, because I don't want to spend all of our time just doing introductions. So we start off with asking a rather general question about your journey. Wanting you to describe your journey towards leadership and how you identify as a Black male educator that's helped to shape that journey. So I'm going to go with the box next to me, and that's Dr. Tyrone Bates. Please mute yourselves.
Thank you, Dr. Ladson Billings. I appreciate you being here to moderate and get us men moving. We appreciate that. And so my name is Tyrone Bates. I'm the coordinator for diversity, equity, inclusion for the Shawnee Mission School District here in Kansas. And, you know, my journey in leadership was one that was non-traditional. I never desired to be in leadership. It grew out of my concerns that I noticed when I was in a position. If somebody could mute, I still hear there's some background noise, and we're recording, so we don't want that to be. Thank you. It grew out of a concern about through work that I was doing as a alternative schools coordinator, and what I noticed is that to a student that I had intakes with to determine, you know, what's the next path, how we're going to redefine their academic plan for graduation. These students were evicted from their schools from either violating the Safe Schools Act, long-term suspension, and these were K-12 students. And what grew concern was that these students were 99.9% Black males. They were filling up our alternative schools left and right. And so I became concerned about who are the gatekeepers in our buildings? Who's allowing students to fail to this degree that look like me time and time again? And I was concerned about the professional development for teachers. How are they being prepared to serve students who don't look like them? What does that look like? And so I said, you know, instead of being a part of complaining about it, let me be a part of the solution, which is what my daddy always told me. And I got in the fold and figured out my way into a leadership role where I could serve in that capacity. And so me being a Black male, I thought it was important because I saw kids like me that were being evicted from schools left and right. And then I also realized that representation matters. And so we needed people in schools that looked like the children that I'm seeing day in and day out being sent to alternative schools, to the juvenile detention center, and so on and so forth. And so that was what propelled me. And I think me being a Black male, it compelled me to want to move into leadership. So that's my story.
I appreciate your response, and I love that you used the term, our kids were being evicted. You didn't say they were being expelled. They're being evicted, which suggests that they belong there, but we weren't letting them stay there. All right, we're going to hand off to Dr. Keith Jones. What do you have to tell us about your journey?
Name is Keith Jones. Thank you again for allowing me to be a part of the panel. I'm currently the head principal at Platte County High School in Missouri. This is my 15th year in education, but my journey didn't start in education. I was a business major, journalism major. So I did PR and fundraising for Sprint in corporate America. And so kind of learned the business field, really results driven, right? But how I got involved was through a mentoring program and coaching basketball in my alma mater in Sumner Academy, KCK. And so I got tied to the classroom, and there's all she wrote. Like far as, you know, a lot of things that Dr. Bates resonates with me as well. I'm going to take a different angle for my journey because I was a basketball coach, I was a teacher, I was a newspaper yearbook sponsor, but then I got the opportunity to work out in the suburbs at Blue Valley, Northwest, where there wasn't a lot of people that looked like me, but there was a good percentage of kids that looked like me. And I think I've been in Lawrence, I've been in Topeka, so I've been in some suburban and urban areas. And one of the things is that is a thing that's not talked about as much, but white kids need to see people of color in leadership as well, right? And so that was a determining factor for me. But also the kids in those environments, I felt like needed an affinity space. They needed representation. They needed to be empowered and validated and affirmed who they were. Someone being an advocate at the table, let me start talking about curriculum. Start talking about hiring, hiring staff. And so it's really motivated me as I'm, in my journey now as a building leader to recruit and retain Black male teachers, but also cultivate all of our kids, not just our Black kids, but definitely our white kids that can be a part of the solution.
Okay, well, thank you. I still got a couple of people who are not muting. So please, so that we can hear everything that the speakers have to say, make sure you are on mute. Okay, so I'm gonna move over to Dr. Strickland. Tell us about your journey.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Jayson Strickland, and I serve as the superintendent of Hogan Prep Academy in Kansas City, Missouri. And I see a lot of friends and family on the call. I say hello to you all. Good to see your faces. It's been a while since I've seen you. And I mention them on purpose, and I note them because I think they have very much a lot to do with why I sit where I sit and why I do what I do. So I want to acknowledge those friends and colleagues and people I've had the opportunity to work with over the years. My journey through education and to leadership in education was fairly typical. I started, but typical from the standpoint of starting as a teacher, but I want to back up a little bit that I was around education my whole life. My family had a childcare business. And so I came acquainted with helping young people at a very early age. And I was drawn to it, and I developed a passion for it early on. Leadership actually was planted in me in a couple of different ways, but one that was probably most significant, frankly, was when I was in college. The seed of leadership was planted in me because I had the good fortune and privilege to be of my fraternity. Now, I won't mention that fraternity, but I see a lot of my fraternity brothers here on the call. They know who they are, but that seed that was planted in me, it actually gave me some confidence in the area of leadership. But it was still early on in terms of not knowing exactly what I wanted to do. I'm going to say a story that was important to me because I had the opportunity to sit in a student teaching forum once. And when I was student teaching, and one of my peers described an interaction she had with a student. She was doing her student teaching in the second grade classroom. And she described the interaction with this student by highlighting that it was a Black boy who had done a misbehavior. And to tell you the truth, I was very offended how she told her story. And because I was offended how she told her story, it planted another seed in me that said that I had to do something in education around supporting people like that and supporting that Black young man that was in that classroom. And I felt that being a male of color in this work, that I had an opportunity, but more importantly, I had an obligation to do that. And so, again, like I said, my pathway to leadership was fairly traditional in terms I was a teacher, I was an assistant principal, I was a district administrator, and then I had the good fortune to move over to Hogan over the last 2 years. But I will say that being a male of color in this work drives me. It drives me from the standpoint of being a Black male. I feel, like I said earlier, this responsibility and an obligation to be a model and a representative of what our young people can have the capacity to do, but more importantly, not just what I do, surpass what I do. And I do that from a place of passion, from a place of obligation. So I'm honored to work in this field and serve young people, and particularly young people of color who may not always have the same access or the same resources to success.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to drop over to Mark Bedell.
All right, well, thank you, Dr. Ladson, Billings, and
Cornell for putting this together. So just as you heard from many of our peers, I'm a superintendent of the Kansas City Public School District, finishing up my 5th year here. And my journey is pretty interesting. I shared that journey with many of the people in this community when I interviewed for this job. And I talked about an experience I had in the 2nd grade as a Black student who didn't have a lot of advocacy from a parental standpoint because of things that the environment I grew up in. But I had a teacher who told me I was dumb, ugly, and would never amount to anything. And I just quit school in the 2nd grade. And I think about what Dr. Ladson Billings said earlier about, George Floyd not necessarily having a fight because of his journey through education and not necessarily being properly educated. These kind of things happen to us a lot. And I made it my mission that I would one day be put into a position where I can have systemic influence around how we see and how we treat kids based on how they show up. And I think for many people in this community, I've been a very outspoken advocate against social injustices. I have no problem calling out how race has played out in this city. I have no problem calling out economic development. I have no problem calling out gender inequities, and I will continue to do those types of things until we see that there is a level playing field, in particular for the kids that we serve that are often written off because of systemic racist practices. And so for me, I knew as a Black leader, I wanted to be an example for kids and adults that aspired to become a superintendent, but to also be a model on how to not compromise your values and beliefs just to play it safe and to keep a job. And I think if you operate in that manner, generally then you can be successful. But if you operate, because of the amount of money you make or the status that comes with the position, and generally you lose the essence of why you became an educator in the first place. And it happens a lot. And then we begin to compromise who we are. And so, for me, I'm going to continue to take that approach. And the thing I will say about working here in the Kansas City Public School District, I said this after the first 3 months of being on the job here when I was doing my listening and learning tours. And I said, just being here 3 months, I'm more conscious of the fact that I'm a Black man living here in Kansas City than anywhere else I've ever lived. And I've lived in Rochester, New York, Nashville, Tennessee, Houston, Texas, Baltimore, Maryland. It's just the way you cut through race is so thick you can cut through it. And so I'm hoping that this platform that we have with B.L.O.C will continue to allow us to have these kind of conversations and to be more aligned around the work that needs to be done and to force true social changes that need to happen with the community that have been redlined and shut out of the Kansas City dream.
Thank you so much. As someone who was an outsider to the Kansas City setting, Kansas City means something when we talk about education. Kansas means something when we talk about education. The 5 cases that got rolled into what we know as Brown versus Board of Education, the culmination really is the Topeka, Kansas board. But then when desegregation actually started to take place, it was Kansas City that was under the microscope. So even though you might think, in some of those places you've lived, Dr. Bedell, I've lived too. I've lived in Baltimore. When they talk about Freddie Gray, I know, when they said the Mondawmin Mall, I was like, excuse me, is the Mondawmin Mall that bad now? Literally, all of these communities. And Kansas City is a very, very interesting place to be educating Black folk. So I hope we can get into more about that. I'm going to move now to Dr. Johnson, Eric Johnson.
Hey, everybody. My name is Dr. Eric Johnson. I'm the principal at Winnetonka High School in Kansas City, Missouri, in the North Kansas City schools. And I'm just sitting here listening to my brother speak, and you can hear their stories and my story, right? You hear this example of how we come to this work because of the necessity of this work. And I think back all the way to when I was a student in high school, when I start thinking about college and post-secondary experiences, I thought I was going to go to school to be a business major. But my senior year, I decided to go into education in a very intentional way because of a best friend, a guy by the name of Brandon. And Brandon, unfortunately, ended up getting murdered while I was in college. But he was the reason why I went into education, because he was what people at that time would call a throwaway kid, a kid who didn't get a chance, right? He was in what at the time we called BD classes, where I was from, behavior disorder. And he didn't see education as a way out. He didn't see education as a way to better himself or his situation. And I realized it wasn't just Brandon, it was other students who lived around in the space that I grew up in as well. And I wanted to do something about that. I wanted to disrupt that. If I couldn't be a disruptor of situations like that, then I didn't feel like my life had real purpose. So I went into education for that reason. And then when I found myself in education, even before I was a professional in the field, just as a student, an education student, I majored in secondary education with an emphasis in English. And I was the only African-American male at the University of Missouri in my cohort class who was a Black male in that field. And I was hypersensitive and hyper aware of my race in that moment. Being from inner city KC, it's very homogenous. I grew up around a whole lot of Black folks. Fortunately, I did have the opportunity to go to Lincoln Prep, where there was more diversity in the district. But I was hyper aware of my race when I went to college, and I became more hyper aware of the injustices that are occurring with students from all different types of isms, those who experienced what I call otherness, because of whether it's racism or being from a target group when it comes to gender or class. Just this otherness is what made me dedicated to being an educator. So I taught at a school in Columbia for 3 years. And when you think about my journey toward education, Brother Strickland has a lot more couth than me. I'm gonna say it. Alpha Phi Alpha was the reason why I gained some of the leadership capacity that I did. I'm gonna put it out there, Brother Jones. I know you don't like it, brother, but not everybody can be Alpha man. No, but seriously, the men of Alpha Phi Alpha just instilled in me this idea that we do have a purpose, and it's our responsibility to look out for those who are like us. So I learned that leadership trait from them. And as I grew into education, I taught for 3 years and realized there were some true, deep, systemic issues that needed to be fixed in education. And at that point in time, I didn't realize the power of teacher leadership and the power that I could have as a teacher leader. So those of you who are teachers, you do have the capacity. You don't have to have a position to lead. So I went into education because I didn't realize the power I had in that moment, into leadership because I didn't realize the power I had in that moment. And I wanted to be able to sit at a table and provide representation for folks whose voices are often left out. And that's why I stay in education, to give voice, to amplify and enhance the voice of those who don't have one. And we think about the experiences of our Black and brown students, men and women, young men and young women. We have an obligation and a duty to make sure we are breaking down barriers and providing opportunities for kids so we can overcome some of these inequities that we're facing in our society today.
Thank you so much. I was really touched by your story about the young boy who ended up being murdered. And one of the things that I think many of our educators don't understand is that some of the very best kids at whatever it is you are trying to push them towards don't even get a chance. I'm gonna date myself here, but I was in high school in Philadelphia at the same time as a young man who went on to be a stellar basketball player. And I saw him because he lived in my neighborhood. We didn't go to the same high school, but I saw him one day and he was upset and crying because he had been cut from the basketball team. And I said, well, did you get cut because the coach doesn't like you? Did you get cut because you weren't good enough? He said, no, I got cut because there's so many other guys better than me. And that young man was Earl Monroe. But one of the things that Earl said to me when he finally got out and I saw him, used to see him at CIAA tournaments, he said, I'm only here because I stayed. He said, the very best basketball players you'll never see because they don't stay. they don't stay. And so I think it's really, incumbent upon us to recognize that, we see these kids that just kind of get thrown away. They're often our best and our brightest, and we haven't given them a real shot. I'm going to move to Dr. Anthony Lewis. Did I lose you on my screen?
I'm here. Can you see me?
Okay, good. There you are.
Awesome. I would concur. Thank you, Dr. Gloria, Ladson, Billings. I'm always honored to be in your presence, considering the amount of research that I've read preparing for this role in education. And I definitely want to give a shout out to the B.L.O.C for creating this space to have this conversation. Before I begin, I do want to share with Dr. Eric Johnson the comments around not everybody can be an alpha man, nor does anybody want to be an alpha man. There was a fraternity that was so nice I had to name it twice. That's all I'll say about that. If my life's trajectory would have been predicated on research, I probably wouldn't be in this chair sitting here today. Born and raised in Talladega, Alabama. To a single parent mother, living in a single wide trailer near the Knoxville projects. We had to compete with the rats in our house for food. And so if you look at the research on single parent Black boys, their trajectory is either dead or in jail. And so also in Talladega is the Alabama Institute for Deaf and Blind, the Helen Keller School. And so I had family members that were educators that worked there. And I began to become intrigued when I would volunteer there over the summer, because these were students that were deaf and blind or had multiple handicaps. And at the time they were calling handicaps. I know we don't use that term anymore. So I began to become intrigued because the adults that were working there were more fixated on their disabilities. But these individuals were playing drums, they were playing sports. And so I was intrigued about their abilities and about what they could do. And so needless to say, I went to pursue a career in special education at one of the premier HBCUs in the country, the Alabama State University in Montgomery, Alabama. Special education, and then assistant principal, then principal of an elementary school there in Montgomery called E.D. Nixon Elementary School. If you're not familiar with E.D. Nixon, I would encourage you to Google that name. Edgar Daniel Nixon, hugely important in the Montgomery bus boycott. So was the principal there. But I decided to go into special education and leadership because of what was poured into me and what was instilled in me. My first Black teacher, her name was Miss Lawrence, told me, they called me Tony at the time, Tony, you're smart. And I had never been told that by an educator. And so currently, I didn't share this, I'm the superintendent in Lawrence Public Schools in Lawrence, Kansas, about 25 miles east of Topeka, Dr. Ladson Billings. And so that trajectory of my life in terms of being an educator and a leader was based on what people had instilled in me, and then my love for proving people wrong about what kids can and cannot do. So E.D. Nixon Elementary School was a high poverty school that was on the brink of state takeover. Over a short period of time, we were able to turn that school around, and it became number 18 out of 706 schools in the state of Alabama, and became a 90-90-90 school, high performing, high poverty school. And that was because adults came together and decided they wanted to do what's best for children of color. And we spoke life into them, spoke words of affirmation into them every single day. Because of the success there, I was recruited to work in Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas City Public Schools as principal, director of elementary schools, and then assistant principal. But when I think about how leadership impacts me and how I look at how I view leadership, I look at, to Dr. Jones' point earlier, the benefit of students of color seeing someone who looked like them in a leadership role. And not only students of color, but non-students of color, the benefits of seeing a person of color in a leadership role, the impact that it can have on their lives. And so when I'm doing classroom visits, my eyes immediately go to the students of color first, because they light up when the teacher tells me, oh, this is the superintendent, or this is the principal. Oh, wow. So they begin to see what's possible. We all heard the adage, they can't be what they can't see. And so the more they're able to see that, the better off we are in terms of preparing them for success in life and definitely in post high school.
Okay. Thank you. Can I get over here to Dr. Stallings? Been patient. You need to come off of mute.
Right, Cornell muted me. So welcome, Sean Stallings, and I'm the executive director at DeLaSalle Education Center here in Kansas City. Also want to shout out Dr. Ladson Billings. Your work and your theories and the things you put together were a critical part of my cohort of New Leaders for New Schools. So you're probably very familiar with that program. Very much read a lot of what you've offered the education system. So thank you. It's a pleasure meeting you and seeing you. My path, right? So I am a third generation educator, and I had no plans on getting into education. It wasn't my goal. But as it turns out, it probably has been my trajectory my whole life. I'm from Chicago, so I'm not of Kansas City. This is my second home now, and I'm from Chicago, Illinois. Had been there my whole life and was raised not even through the public school system. I was raised through the parochial school system. So my story is a little different. I came from a parochial school called Holy Angels. Holy Angels, as Dr. Billings sees it, Holy Angels was not your typical parochial school. There were two gentlemen that ran that place from the 60s to the 90s. And that gentleman those two gentlemen were Father Paul B. Smith, who was the principal from Louisiana, and Father George Clemens, who was the pastor. And they ran that place like a well-oiled machine. But the key component about that place was that though we were a private school, we were not a rich school. We were right in the heart of what's now Bronzeville, but we call it the low end in Chicago, right by the Ida B. Wells homes and Robert Taylor homes and any other homes you want to call it. And my friends and the people I grew up with, we were just told two things: produce and achieve. That was our motto, to produce and achieve. And so my whole life, I saw Black men as leaders. I saw those two gentlemen represent and hold us to high expectations. And so one thing that we were always encouraged and always told is that you had to know and you had to learn, right? So embedded in me from a very early age was this idea of efficacy and working hard and putting forth effort. And that was really important to me. And then I happened to come from a family of educators, right? My grandmother was a math teacher for 40 years at Phillips High School that was in that low end. It was maybe 2 blocks away from where I went to grammar school. My mother and my aunts were teachers. And so I grew up with education as a priority. I used to remember staying at my grandmother's house and seeing the students who loved her come over and visit and spend time with her. I used to see my mother take kids under their wings. And, I had a whole lot of brothers that they weren't blood, but they were young men my age who would come to spend the night because they didn't have any other place to go. And my mother was taking them in. And so I saw these different makers directly with me, but I didn't want to get into education. So I went to college and going to college. Well, first of all, back up. Where I went to grammar school, they poured greatness into you. Where I went to high school, I went to a school called St. Ignatius College Prep. It's considered the best high school in the state of Illinois. They poured greatness out of you if you were a Black man. So you really understood who you were to them as you went through their system, and they would tell you you were lucky to survive it. And so I survived it. Then I went to college, and like many other brothers on this call, I pledged the best fraternity in the world, the only one, the Black and Gold. It got cold outside today for us, and so we all know Alpha Phi Alpha. If you didn't choose it, it probably didn't choose you. So that's all I'm gonna say to that. But as I think about it, I learned a lot through my experience in college. And I learned two things, right? I just learned this sense of self-advocacy and being vocal, and I call it fearless vocality, right? You got to speak your mind. Like in our spaces, we can't be afraid, as Dr. Bedell said, when that next paycheck's gonna come. And we got to speak up, because if we don't, then we're part of that problem. And then I also just learned leadership in this sense of how to build teams and build capacity and pouring into others. And it's probably a combination of all I've been through, right? So like at my grammar school and at my high school, you just learn this idea of servant leadership and giving it to others and sacrificing yourself. And I think that's somewhat what we do in our positions, that part of the thing that has to be important for us is to build capacity into other people, and hopefully to make sure that there are other people that look like us that come along this pipeline so we can fill it and we don't become that unicorn. And I think that's really important. The other thing is it's fearlessness for equity. And you know, and even here, you know, a school that's 90% Black and 100% poor, you know, we have equity issues even in our building. Like, you know, some kids get access to certain things because of who they know on the staff and other kids don't. That's an equity issue. And we have to be in positions to tamp that down. And so the last thing I say is at the end of the day, it's really about how do we use our platform and how do we ideate around the things that can come from what we produce and what we create, so that we continue to make this a better situation for our young people and for the people in our community. And so that's the important piece. And that's, you know, I think that's how I carry myself, or at least I hope so, into the space and into the profession.
So thank you. One of my closest friend in the academy, Dr. William Tate, who is the only Black provost.
And he's also an Alpha man.
He's the only Black provost in the SEC, now at the University of South Carolina, is a product of Holy Angels.
Yes, he is.
So
he just left St. Louis, if I'm not mistaken, Washington.
Yes, he was at WashU for many years. He was in the graduate school.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm going to throw it over to Brother Rodney Smith to wrap us up on this cycle.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Ladson Billings. I appreciate it. And I think it's appropriate that I would go last, being that I'm the only higher education administrator on the panel. And also I'm the only Omega on the panel. And it is appropriate that I go last because you save greatness for last. And so, and the reason why I've come to the conclusion, I've always wondered why I'm always the only Omega. And I've come to the conclusion that it's just hard pledging Omega. So it's easier getting into these other clubs and groups, but the only fraternity is talking now.
Ooh, boy, I'm gonna have to rein in some of this gang behavior.
So I am Vice President for Access and Engagement at William Jewell College here in the Kansas City Metro, and William Jewell is in Liberty. And fun fact, I'm the first African-American person to serve on cabinet level at this institution. And ever since, so I cut my teeth at historically Black colleges. I went to Morris Brown as an undergraduate. I worked at Morris Brown, but that's where the education bug bit me in the admissions office. I left there and went to Clark Atlanta. I left Clark Atlanta with the Fisk. So I cut my teeth. And in fact, all of my degrees, I have a master's, a bachelor's, a master's, and a doctorate, all from historically Black colleges. But ever since I left the historically Black college arena, I've been typically by myself. I've not had any mentors outside of the historically Black college arena. As far as typically when I'm on a college campus, I worked at UMKC, I worked at, and now I'm working at William Jewell. And typically I am the highest ranking Black male on every campus that I'm on. And I've not had mentors up until now. I have a gentleman who I've asked to be my mentor, who's the president of the University of Southern Indiana, who is also my fraternity brother, Dr. Ronald Rashawn.
Oh.
So I say that to say, I know we rib each other, these gentlemen that we know each other well, you know, Dr. Bedell, Dr. Bates, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Lewis, you know, Dr. Jones. These guys are my community. You know, not on our panel today, but he's on the screen, Dr. Dennis Carpenter. These guys are my community. These guys are the guys who, you know, I know that's out there doing similar things that I'm doing, but they're doing it at the K-12 level. So I say all that to say, I'm so appreciative for these kinds of conversations, these kind of panels, for selfish reasons, because I get the chance to see my community. I get the chance to be with my boys, basically, because I live, and especially in the world in which I live and work, it's a lonely existence. It has been for the past 15 years of my life. Like I said, typically, I'm the highest ranking Black man on any campus that I've been on because there are so few Black men. So, but that's why it encourages me to stay, and I'm always making efforts to try to duplicate myself in younger people on campus, because a lot of times, unfortunately, I am the only Black male that they will ever see on a college campus. I still teach in the classroom as well. I'm a graduate adjunct professor at UMKC, and I teach students who are working towards a master's degree and or doctorate, and I sit on a couple of dissertation committees and things of that nature. Every semester, believe it or not, every semester, there's at least one and more like 4 or 5 students that will come up to me at UMKC and say, you know, Dr. Smith, you're the first Black man that I've ever had in the classroom. I've ever had teaching me from K through 12. So I say all that to say, I understand the importance of my presence.
Okay.
And so I say that to my brothers. So understand the importance of your presence in the environments in which you work, because those young people need you and they need to see you.
Okay. Thank you. So that was our first round of questions. And I will say that what I have in common with these gentlemen is that I'm a mother of 3 adult Black males and a grandmother of 1 Black male. So I'm watching this whole process in real time. But what I don't have in common with any of them is I'm not an administrator. I have had to do it because they made me do it. And I did it kicking and screaming. It's just not my calling. I've been the department chair. I could come home every night just crying, because I can't deal with these people, right? I was in the provost's office and I was like, no, this is not for me. I'm a teacher. And I think one of the things that happens is that people go into teaching for what I think of as positive reasons. Often some teacher inspired them, or they had some experience with teaching that said, yeah, this is a good thing to do. Often people go into administration because what they see is so bad. And so they go in thinking, well, you know what, maybe I can fix this. So we've got people who are principals, superintendents, higher ed folks, but all administrators, all in charge of running things. So I'm gonna throw you a little bit of a curve with this next question and just suggest that you talk about what you see as different about the work you do, whether you are a superintendent, whether you are a principal, or whether you're a higher ed administrator. So this time, I think I'm going to start with Dr. Lewis. What is it that you do that's different?
Yeah, so when I think about, just the difference in being a building administrator to either district administrator, definitely a building principal to the superintendent role, one is just obviously the greater responsibility and the fact that the decision rests with you on a district level. I know in a building, most of the decisions rest with the building principal, but there's always some times where the principal, will need to consult with district staff. But at the superintendent level, you're it, other than your board. And so just that increased level of responsibility for an entire system. And then also knowing that similar to a principal, how a decision impacts other stakeholders that are involved at the building and school community level. But from a superintendent's level, the impact is greater, on a city, on a large number of staff members, as well as large number of families. But I think from a standpoint of just being a Black male from a school building to a superintendent level is just the greater exposure of students of color, the greater exposure of any student seeing a Black male in such a high position, and also knowing what's possible. So those will be some of the immediate differences of being a building level principal and a superintendent. Now, I will say is it's more political at this level, definitely more political. And I always said that I never wanted to be a superintendent because I just didn't believe in playing politics on the backs of kids. However, in saying that and being in this role, as long as you're making decisions that's in the best interest of students, you'll be fine. But please know it is political, and there are things that people say. Because here's the thing: at this level, any decision that you make, you're not going to please everybody, and you shouldn't be seeking to please everybody. If you're wanting to please everybody, leadership is not for you. Maybe a job at Disney World is, but leadership is not for you if you really want to please people. And so that's another difference in knowing that you're going to upset a large number of people. That's okay. Again, as long as you're making the best decisions for the students that are in the seat, you'll be fine.
Okay. Well, Principal Jones, it's your house, right? It's your house. You don't have to worry about all these other schools. It's your house. So tell us, what you see is very different from the work that you're doing than the work that some of these superintendents are doing.
Well, I mean, the first thing as a building principal, you want to build relationships with your community, right? And so I've been in KCK where there's 6 high schools and 8 middle schools. I've been in Lawrence where there's 2 big high schools. And now I'm in a community where there's 1 high school and it's really, 2 middle schools. So I've kind of had an experience of being in 3 different sizes where the role of the principal is a little bit different, right? And your visibility. I feel like I'm not trying to be funny, but I'm next to the mayor in as far as in Platte County, because my position in the superintendent is so visible, right? And far as the responsibility. But as a building, I'm really that covering on what's the best interest for the kids that I serve, the staff that I serve. And so really knowing my community, knowing their needs, because I've been in a district, like I was in Lawrence with Dr. Lewis, and it's 2 sides of town. And some of the needs that I had at my middle school was totally different from the needs in the middle school across town. And so therefore you have to be able to build relationships with the other principals, because it's kind of like, how can I get what I need for my building to serve the students and staff that I serve when, we want to stay true to the district mission and district vision. And so you're always balancing that, and partnering. That vertical alignment piece is crucial. Now in a smaller district, I got to make sure the things that we're doing at the high school, that they are present and available at the middle school. So really my responsibility now starts in kindergarten. It starts, so we make an effort to make sure that our elementaries know who the principals are. Those kids come to our games. They come to our football games, our basketball games. We adopt either a kindergarten class or a 5th grade class. So they can say, oh, I know that's the high school principal. Because when you're in a system like that, you're branding what we're about. And so kids from the elementary level understand what it means to be a pirate. They move to the middle school, I understand what it means to be a pirate. So by the time they get to the high school, we've developed this common language about what's important, what we believe, our core values. And so, but as what I found the difference is that my superintendents that I work for usually have the big picture, right? And they have to deal with the community of different communities within their city. However, my responsibility is to make sure I'm committed to the district mission, but also committed to the people I serve, the kids I serve.
Okay. So Dr. Smith, you know that in higher education, there's a tremendous amount of autonomy that the faculty has, not like being in PK-12. So as an administrator, how's your job different than what you're hearing from your colleagues on the panel?
Yeah, there's some similarities, but there's some difference. And I was just thinking about how I would respond to that question, and I hope it doesn't sound like hubris when I say this, that as a member of the cabinet at an institution, when people ask the question, so what does the college think about that? Right? They're talking about me, basically. They're talking about the administrators. It's like, what does the college think about that? They're really asking what do the leaders of the institution think about that? So I have to be ready to respond. So for give you an example, like a couple of days ago when the verdict was being read, or before the verdict was being read, I had to come up with a plan to what the institution would say and do, depending on if the verdict wasn't what it was, right? Or if there's if there's something that happens out in the community and the institution needs to make a statement, well, guess who's writing that statement in most cases? It's me and my colleagues, right? So that's how it's different. Whereas, as a college classroom professor, I'm king of the classroom. I have domain over my classroom, but as an administrator now, as a vice president for an institution, I have to really be mindful that my thoughts matter and what I say matter to the entire campus community. And I can't just say anything and I have to really be thoughtful about my words because they matter to a lot of different people. I can't just be flippant. You have to really be, and I'm sure I'm not saying anything many of the superintendents don't understand. That the buck stops with you. It is you.
Well, Dr. Strickland, the buck stops with you. How is your work different than the work of principals?
I think Dr. Lewis did an excellent job of really describing some of the difference between kind of higher level superintendent. When I say higher level, I mean just higher level in the organization, not necessarily referring to importance, but just higher level in the organization, the difference between that. I'll add maybe that this little thing that there are lots more moving parts that you have to pay attention to. And I think I think some of missteps with some of those moving parts can have huge ramifications in ways that you just don't know. And so I think that principals, frankly, have some of the hardest jobs in education. I will be the first to say that. And I think that principals, frankly, are the key resource to improving student achievement. The superintendent is a role that supports that principal. The superintendent is in the position to kind of create the environment that allows the teacher to be successful and allows the principal to be successful. I had a mentor say it to me one way, that there are only two jobs in a school district. It's those that teach kids and those that support those that teach kids. And the ones that are closest to kids need to have all the support to be successful. And I see my role as a person in support of those that teach kids, and that's channeled through the principal, channeled through a lot of quality educators, right through to the teacher. But just said a different way, that I think that there's just a lot of moving parts that the superintendent has to pay attention to, and in order to kind of keep the entire organization moving forward. And I'll say just a little bit of a tweak, that I have the privilege of serving in a charter school, and that's relatively new for me. One of the things that I think I see in this leadership role in a charter school is there's kind of an entrepreneurial aspect of it. There's a business kind of aspect of it, that we have to drum up our students. We have to have a product that people pick in the charter school scenario, or we basically go out of business. And so as I have shifted into this leader role in the charter world, I've had to think about it from that aspect too, that I have to be an educator, I have to be a leader, and I also have to be an entrepreneur and business person too, in this leadership role in the charter school organization.
Okay. Well, Dr. Bedell, I will tell you that, you still have to deal with a bunch of money too. I mean, the fact is that you can't, if you don't get the citizens of Kansas City to pass referendums and bonds and things like that, you may go out of business, and I think people in Kansas City still mad over that swimming pool. But let me just say, just ask you again, how do you see your work as sort of qualitatively different, even quantitatively different from the work of, say, a building principal?
Yes, it's a huge difference. You're basically a super principal. When I was a high school principal in Houston, I followed a 42-year veteran, Mr. Franklin D. Wesley, at Booker T. Washington High School, which is the first African-American high school for the Houston Independent School District. And it was at that time that I began to learn around my responsibility to try to galvanize that respective community and to remove this label. There was an acronym when I got to school, when I became the principal. Booker T. Washington stood for bum, thugs, and winos. That was the acronyms that people referred to with the students in that school. And then having to figure out, how do we change that narrative and get involvement into the school where we can turn it around, because it was a very high performing school before Mr. Wesley started to ill in health. And he passed away shortly after he retired. And so I learned that that was my city, that community in Acres Home. Moving to the superintendent role, it just becomes super, because now you're meeting with the who's who in the city. You have access unlike you've ever had before. You standing meetings with the mayor, you meeting with presidents of franchises of professional sports, you're meeting with billionaires that have agendas. You're meeting with the common person that feels like they've been shut out of the dream, and they're depending on you to kind of help leverage the positional power that you have to help level that playing field. And then I think the other thing that's different from being a building principal is that everything that I do as a superintendent is under the microscope. The second I sign a new contract, every section of my contract is being broken down for everybody to know, right? That's not going to happen as a building principal. You have a salary scale, you're set. And then the last thing I would say is that instead of reporting to one boss, you're reporting to 7. And so part of your job is you got to manage up to make sure that there's cohesion there, and a good superintendent has to have that ability. Every time there's a new iteration of a board, how do you work with everybody, and how do you feed into each of those board members individually and balance that so it doesn't look like one is getting more attention over the other? And then you also then have to manage, as the executive of the school system, the other 2,500 employees that you're responsible for. And so everything that goes well, I always take this attitude to give it back to the people in the trenches who work and they make this happen. And everything that goes bad, well, you already know it's going to be, because I'll be the one that's on the news having to deal with all of those darts and bullets that come with a kid that didn't get home, or some incident that occurred at school that has now brought negative media attention to the district. It's significantly different around just the responsibility factors that you have. 100 balls bouncing in the air compared to 50 when you are a building principal.
Okay, so Dr. Bedell gave us the sort of numbers game. Dr. Bates, what's the qualitative difference that we're talking about here?
So amid all the things that we all do in our work as leaders, what we also have to do as Black men is coach the organization around how to support us. Because that's one thing that's not inherent in many organizations, is how to support Black men. It's almost like a woman's uterus that isn't ready to hold a baby. It's ejecting the baby every time. Those systems that aren't firm enough, that aren't healthy enough, that aren't aware enough. And so part of my work is, I'm juggling 2 balls at the same time. And that is, one is, how do I coach the system on how to support me, how to understand me, how to relate to me, while I also, in my work as the coordinator of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I'm also working to help others be able to do the same thing for students that don't look like them, sound like them, act like them, think like them. And so that's kind of the world that I live in. And I think that's kind of, qualitatively how it sort of fits. It feels. We all have that. All of us, all the men on this panel have that challenge. Is how do I support? How do I coach the system around how to support me so that I don't get burnt out to the point where I'm ready to go find an affinity space in another district that can support me. One of the things that my ultimate goal in my work, and I think all of our work that sort of bleeds all of us together, is trying to achieve this notion of belongingness. And my brother Rodney, who is an Omega that I love, I'm going to use his quote and cite him when he talks about belongingness being the lubricant for learning. And learning is the epitome of our work, right? Our goal is to ensure that the students that enter our spaces leave as critical thinkers and problem solvers. And if they don't feel like they belong, the likelihood of that happening and them going out into the world is slim.
Okay, thank you. We have another panel member that has joined us, and I want to make sure we get him in, and that's Brother Dennis Carpenter. So can you unmute and tell us a little bit about what your journey has been like through education?
Yeah, John Lewis was overlooked, but not for his work. Who knows where we'd be as it relates to voting right now. Weldon Johnson, he penned Lift Every Voice and Sing. Beautiful, beautiful men, and I could go on, a Phi Beta Sigma, who stood silently and listened.
I'm sorry, I'm not on
and waited their turn. But the work that they did allowed others to live more fully. I am Dr. Dennis Carpenter, former superintendent in the Kansas City region, currently serving as Director of Education Operations at Thought Exchange, allowing communities and school districts and corporate entities to scale conversations in a more equitable way. With that being said, my journey has been complete in my mind and complex. Serving 25 years in this field, 7 in the Kansas City region. And it's an honor to be here spending a little time with the guys who held me down when I decided to do more than being a black face that our kids can see and aspire to. You see, it's one thing for children to see us in these spaces, but it's yet another for them to see us show up in these spaces, right? Because we can be here and we can persist in the space and never show up. We can live in these spaces and never thrive in these spaces. So what I will say to the gentleman and the panel, as they continue to do the work in the region, do all you can while you can. And do the work of him who sent you. And do that work while it's still day. Because night will come as it relates to your career. And when the night cometh, no man can work. No man can work. So when I sit in North Augusta, South Carolina, on my 25-acre estate now, and I look over the back at night with a cold adult beverage, I know I did my work when it was day. I did my work when it was day. So I'm gonna say to all the guys, keep doing your work while it is day.
So y'all saw that blue fireman took a text. Thank you. Let me go to you, Dr. Stallings. What's the difference in the work you do and some of the other men on this panel?
I can't believe you made me follow that. I was still taking notes. Dr. Carpenter, salute. What I do differently. So this is interesting because this is my first charter experience. And so I was in a very big district, third largest district in the country. And what I do differently now is I speak more truth to power. I think that the silence that comes over you in bigger spaces and more political spaces tends to become oppressive. And that was the experience that many of us felt in Chicago. And so here, having the autonomies that come with leading a charter organization has been refreshing. Now, so that's one thing. This is to Jayson's point. I think the two things that I do pretty regularly is I build more now. Like I have now kind of have the space to start building systems that I feel like will last a lot longer than me and will be something that's sustainable over time. And that will be really, really good for kids and good for kids that look like our community. And so all the best things that I've learned, I'm able to start to bring into a system and begin to create around that. And so I probably do way more creation and building now and have had more of an inspiration to put things together in such a way that I know that I'm building for the future and I'm laying a foundation. And so I've gotten out of the space of immediate gratification or doing something for an immediate result. I'm committed to some long-term success. And that has been critical for this. And then finally, just along with that building and creating, it's also finding the right people and being intentional in who is starting to come into spaces, and then also who has to leave spaces. So it's like making sure that you bring people in and not live a long time with bad talent, bad capacity, bad hires. And so that, and I don't feel constricted by a union contract or by the alderman or councilman that wants to tell you what you have to do within your organization. So I would say that is what I do differently, and that's what has been feeling very differently in this space.
All right, so take us on home, Dr. Johnson. What is it different about what you do than the other members of the panel?
So I appreciate what our superintendents are saying. And as each one of them spoke, what really came to mind is this idea that, the king dreams it, but he needs the hand to help build it, right? And superintendents create the space for systems to change, to put the appropriate systems in place. As a building principal, the way I look at it is being the chief liaison to understanding, making folks understand where they're coming from, because superintendents are doing things on a very high level. So they may have a decision or a situation that's highly political, and people may not understand the different reasons why they're making decisions that they are. And it's the building principal's job to help parents understand it, to help kids understand it, to help your faculty understand it. And it's my job to filter it and package it in a way that people can receive it, right? We're here to help operationalize the dream and the vision that they have in place, right? On the boots to the ground level every single day. If we're talking about creating equitable opportunities for kids on a very high level, what does that look like in my school building when teachers have kids in front of them every single day? When we have people who have mindsets that may not necessarily be amiable to what the superintendent's asking. How am I putting those things in place to make sure kids are getting a fair shake? To make sure that educators are doing the intrinsic work that they need to do to change what's happening systemically in our buildings. So when I think about my job as a building principal, it really is to humanize the work that these superintendents are asking us to do, to make sure that we are operationalizing the mission and vision of our organization. And if you have this large vision that you have for what you want education to look like for kids, it's my job to make sure that that comes to fruition. And if there's something that's happening within that vision, unfortunately, some folks are in a space where superintendents are not doing what they're supposed to do. It's my job to speak on behalf and advocate for the communities that I need to help understand what's best for kids. So pushing back against stuff that is not aligned with where I think is in the best interest of the people who we're serving. So I think that's my role as a principal.
So thank you. Wow, what we had so much information and insights in that round. We're gonna do something a little bit different on this third round. I have a good young colleague at Teachers College, Christopher Emden, who was sort of the brains behind hip hop ed and science genius. Chris is a New Yorker, lived his whole life there in the Bronx, went to college in New York, teaches in New York. And he said he came home one day, he said, finally, my salary got to that place where I could do it. So I went out and got that whip I really wanted. So here I am in the Bronx with my BMW. And then one of the little brothers in the community came up to him and said, yo, Chris, help me get the hookup so I can get one of these. Because you know what he presumed Chris was doing, living in the Bronx, driving a BMW. And what Chris said to him is, you know what, bro? Meet me here tomorrow in my car, at my car. And I'm gonna get you the hookup. I'm gonna show you what it is I'm doing. And he took him down to Teachers College, Columbia, and said to this young man, this is what I do. And the kid was like, you can make money to buy a Beamer doing this? He said, yeah, you can, but you got to stay at it. So this question is asking you each to imagine that there's a young brother somewhere who sees you and says, how do you get to do this? What is it that you say to them? And I'm not talking about just the basic, you got to stay in school, you got to grad. I mean, what's the heart-to-heart conversation that you have with that young brother who maybe someone else in your organization has said, you'll never make it. You'll never do. What's the conversation that gets that young brother in your place? And this time what I'm going to do differently is I'm just going to let whoever wants to start off. I'm not going to call on you. We'll move around. So who wants to jump in first?
I'm gonna go first. The reason why I guess also being a principal gives you great stories and things that I encounter on a daily basis. I have a young man that actually I just suspended. I suspended him for 5 days for fight. No, it was a fight, and he was recording the fight. So we suspended him for recording the fight, and came in with his mother. And so me, him, and his mother sat down and learned more about this gentleman that we didn't know. He had a story, right, of depression, attempted suicide, all these other things. And I'm like, man. And his mother was so passionate about like, hey, this kid is smart, just doesn't have anyone in his corner. Doesn't want to go to your school because there's no representation, right? And so I was like, wow, I was really at a loss for words because I was so angry at this young man, black boy, that taped 2 other Black kids fighting. So therefore he's perpetuating the stereotype that we don't know how to act in this white school, right? So that's kind of where I was getting at. So he goes home. I emailed him that night and I said, young king, and I kind of just talked to him about how that I'm so glad he's at my school, and how this mistake or this decision does not define him, and how hopefully that he finds someone positive in our building to be able to connect with. And then now that I know who he is, every time I see him, I'm speaking to him and we're holding him accountable. And so it's kind of like, I look forward of going on this journey with you because we all got a story, right? And wherever you want to go, I'm gonna help you get there. And so it was one of those things where I get the opportunity to meet kids all the time. But if a kid said that to me, it's more so about being transparent with them, teaching them life lessons. I'm in a situation where they haven't really seen a Black leader before. I had a young man, he used to head nod me all the time. He wanted to speak. Finally, the other day, he says, "Hey, Keith Jones." I looked at him like, "No, that's not what we do. We don't do the full name." He said, "Oh, and so he kind of went away. The next day, he comes to me and he's like, "I'm so sorry. I just didn't really know how to talk to you, but you seem like real cool. So like, I kind of want to get to know you." And I was like, "We can get to know each other." I said, "But you're not gonna call me by my first name." I said, "Boy, you lost your mind." And I kind of put my arm around him. We walked down the hall. But there's this urgent sense of like, people want that. Like they want that relationship. So I guess the best thing I could do is to, if they want mentorship, just be consistent in giving them that relationship, but also, tell them the realness, right? Being honest with them about your journey, your path, but also just showing up. Just showing up and being consistent, whether it's sitting with them at lunch, whether it's going to their game, or whether it's when you have to suspend them. And so I just think it's one of those things where they need to see you in all those different phases.
Great. I'm going to give you 2 examples, Dr. Ladson, Billings, one with kids and then one with adults. And I'll tell you, as a building principal, playing basketball with my students was just a wonderful thing, a wonderful way to connect with the students. And we had a faculty versus staff game one year. We beat them, but the ball came off the rim and this kid caught one on me. And I'm looking at staff like, he caught it. All of his man parts on my head. And I'm looking at staff like, why didn't any of y'all box out? How y'all let this happen, right? So I saw this kid next day in the hallway, and I always wanted to be like Joe Clark. I had a bullhorn, and I would carry my cart around with, my instructional stuff in as I'm doing class visits. So I said his nickname was Moochie. So I turned on the bullhorn, Moochie, everybody to know. Called Moochie over to me. Said, "Moochie, if you ever, put your man parts on me like that again, you're going to get suspended." Now, everybody was laughing, but Moochie ended up going to Alcorn State to major in education because of the relationship that I was able to form with him through basketball, but then also just being personable and having, just enjoying being around the kids. Moochie would have been a phenomenal teacher. During his sophomore year, he came back to the Houston area. Something happened, lost control of his car. He lost his life, right? I serve as a mentor in our MOCA mentoring program, Men of Color, Honor, and Ambition, which is a part of our mentoring portfolio. And Daryl Davis is on, who's our assistant superintendent over that. And so we get an opportunity to constantly feed into kids, but I also have a responsibility as a superintendent to try to help grow people within the organization to go on and be superintendents. Now I use Anthony Lewis as an example because I have to, because he's a close friend of mine. But when I started this job, Anthony ended up taking over interim in over school leadership. Now I remember sitting down with him in my office and said, "Hey man, what's your aspirations? What do you want to do?" And he said, "I'm interested in being a superintendent." Well, let me put you in a position to make that happen, right? So we got him into Supes Academy. We would always spend time together talking about the work. Eventually, it was time for him to interview. He interviews for Lawrence. I believe you're the first Black superintendent out there, right? Are you the first Black superintendent in the history of Lawrence? But in any event, being able to work with people within your organization and having those conversations, what do you aspire to do? Just had that conversation with Daryl Davis the other day. And I think we have that responsibility to try to work with these young, African-American leaders that aspire to want to go have a larger impact and to be examples for our kids that we too can aspire to the highest levels that this field has to offer. So I just want to share, that's kind of how I've operated on both fronts, whether it's with the student or with adults within the organization.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one.
Go ahead, Doc.
I'm sorry about that. Go ahead. No, you go ahead, Dr. Bates. Go ahead.
Are you sure?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I can go after.
So my aunt that's 10 years older than me, who changed my diapers, she tells me that every time she gets an opportunity to, she taught me this lesson when I was working real hard to help everybody else's kids and coach everybody else's kids. She said, charity starts at home. She said, you can do everything for everybody else, but you better start with your own babies first. And so the recipe that I use for my own children is the same that I use for people that I coach. And that is, I ask them to find these four things. One, find your source, right? I want you to, I want you to help, I want you to be able to understand where you get your motivation from, right? I need you to be clear about that. What's motivating you, what's getting you up out the bed, what's driving you, understanding whose you are. And then I tell them to find their center, right? How are you complicit and how are you disrupting inequitable systems? Because as a male, typically who's your typically who I'm going to be mentoring mostly, who's going to be looking for me to coach them. That look like me. And so I want to make sure they understand they are responsible for helping to disrupt inequity and inequitable systems. And then I ask them to find their conscience. I want them to find their conscience. What are you saying to yourself? What's the self-talk you're doing to yourself? What are you saying to yourself in those quiet moments, right? Have you talked to yourself, right? And what are you saying? What are you hearing, right? So find your conscience. And finally, I coach my kids around and lead them around finding their community. Who's picking you up when you fall? Who's picking you up when you get knocked down? Because you will fall. And you need folks around you that you can trust. And we talk about keeping our circle tight, keeping that circle tight. And these men on this call are part of my circle that help me stay tight. And when I fall, helps me to get back up. And so finding your source, your center, your conscience, and your community is how I coach and support young men who are aspiring for anything.
Dr. Stallings, you were going to jump in. Come on.
Absolutely. So I mean, similar to Dr. Bedell, I'm gonna frame it in two ways, like my relationship with students and then my relationship with adults, right? So with students, one strategy I have is just remember every name you meet, right? Every kid you meet, remember their name, remember their identity, remember their story. Like it has to mean something to you. When you hit kids with that, when you remember their name, you remember their story, that makes an impression. And then there's two other things which is really hard, right? Is you never give up on kids. Like you just never give. Like I can't give up on a kid. I don't even know how. I think I've coached out my system of quitting on students. But then there's a balance between accountability and enabling, and not treating, you got to hold them accountable, but you can't. That tough love thing it don't always work with this generation of kids. You've got to figure out a slight way not to enable, but also to still be tough with them so that they can grow. So that's for young people, right? I think when you do that, you just build this relationship and it becomes a lifetime piece, because if you never give up on them, they're always yours. And you always feel responsible to them. With adults, it's different. And I'm gonna be very honest. I give up on adults. I think we would be lying to people because we have all fired people. And sometimes you fire them forward, right? Sometimes you let them go and they got to go forward and not do what you need them to do in that space. And that's okay. But when I encounter, particularly we talking, being transparent, we're talking Black men of color, right? That Black men that want to be in these roles. I think there's a couple things we have to do with them and do. And I try to do it. I'm not perfect, but I try really hard. One is being brutally honest with them. You just got to be honest with people. Like, and sometimes that honesty is not going to always come out as nice and cuddly. Maybe this is the big city in me. I'm not nice and cuddly all the time. So just, you have to be brutally honest with people. But then you start to shift it, right? Look for the possibility in every experience. Every experience has a possibility. I came up through ranks where I was an athletic director, and like I'm sitting there making sure before the basketball game starts, I'm out there mopping the floor and cleaning the floor. And for football games, we didn't have a lot of money. So I was out there lining the football field. But everything demonstrated this possibility that I cared that much for the small things and those details. Another piece is just suspend your judgment, your personal bias and your personal judgment. You got to suspend that, because if you want to see everything, you got to suspend that judgment. And then there's two more pieces. We have all experienced hurt and trauma, and we all have experiences that, you know, every single one of us can talk about stories of people we lost or conditions we've been in. Those aren't deficits, those are strengths. We have persevered and we've made it to this point. So use our experiences as strengths, because we can get past and beyond that. And then finally, you know, especially for Black men in this space, don't settle for just the operational work or the disciplinarian work. You got to learn everything, and learn everything you can about that education sphere. Learn everything you can about classroom change and management and instruction. And don't assume anything. You just learn it all, and like be a sponge, because what I think what happens with that is that you continue to feel good about this work. Mm-hmm. You continue to be inspired because every day you can learn something different. Mm-hmm. And then at that point, just take chances, right? So like, and that for me is the reason I enjoy this, and I want to be a part of the lives of people that want to aspire to do the things that we're doing. We have a young man at this school that's an alum, and I'm telling people now, he is going to be the executive director. It might not happen while I'm here, but he's going to be the executive director. I get that young man 5 to 10 years, and if he stays on this path, he's phenomenal. His name is Corey Boston, so I'm giving Corey Boston a shout.
All right. What you
I
say?
want to add a little bit to that before we go on, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Carpenter.
There are lots of technical things that we can tell young folks who want to do this work, but I think we do them a disservice if we don't share with them the adaptive part of this work that they need to be very clear about. So now that I'm talking to lots of young folks that want to move up the food chain in K-12, the first thing I tell them they need to have is moral clarity. They need to be morally clear on who they are and what they're about. They need to be extremely clear about what hills they would die on unapologetically. They need to be very clear about that. And not only do they need to be clear about it, but everyone around them and under their leadership needs to be clear about it and know that about them. Because that helps in terms of establishing direction and how the organization will go under their leadership. And the second piece that I think is extremely important, you know, most of us, especially I'm thinking about Black males and Black females who come to me for advice. In almost all instances, we grew up with a certain level of faith. And what I share with them is don't ever be afraid to trust your faith. Trust it all the time without reservation. Because when you do that, you'll always make the right decision for the right reason. And then from a personal experience, I tell them it'll always work in your favor. It won't work in your favor sometimes, but it'll always work in your favor, even when you don't feel like it is. Even when you don't feel like it's working in your favor, it always does. And I think when we get into the technical too much with young folks wanting to do this work, and they're not centered on who they are adaptively, then we set them up for failure in a system that doesn't want them there anyway. So I just wanted to offer that.
Thank you. I have the, very sad responsibility of keeping my eye on the clock. I told Cornell as we went into, I said, we're not gonna get through with so many questions. But I do want to say before we close out that one of the things that is happening here that our young people need to understand, this is a squad. This is a squad. All of our young people have their squads. And often our schools are designed to break their squads up. We tell them things like, just do, think on your own. You don't need nobody. If you're going to get through this life, you're going to need somebody's. our issue for our kids is not that they have squads, sometimes they have the wrong squad. And so that the work that we want to do with these young people is helping them to select the right kind of people to be around them. I'm working with some young brothers in Sacramento, and their slogan is, school is my hustle. Like when people ask them, what's your hustle? School is my hustle. And they have a squad. The reason that these men can do the work they do is they have each other. They have the ability to pick up a telephone, send an email, send a text to another person who is in the midst of what they are in, someone that can see what they're doing. So for all of you out there who are looking to move into administration, if you're looking out there to be a leader, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to have the title to do the job. I'm gonna tell you that. But if you want to be a leader, you're going to need people around you that hold you up and support you, challenge you, correct you, discipline you, and most of all, love you. So I have just, I don't know about you, but I've learned so much in the midst of this conversation. I want to thank each and every one of you for just being you and being a part of this. I think we get to turn this over to Cornell now. We had, close to 100 people here, and you just really dropped jewels the whole time.
I really appreciate all that. And you all are a part of my heart. You all are a part of this work. You all are a part of my passions. And I just echo all the thanks and the sentiments of all the panelists this evening. And y'all are helping keep the block hot. So thank you all for being with us for the opening ceremonies of LiberatED. Tonight, we're gonna keep moving forward to the Artful Liberation, a soulful experience with Dr. Auburn. You'll be able to find that in the sessions section of Feed Loop, the same place you found this one. It's the next one underneath. We're already live, we're already rocking, and we'll see you there.
Thank you, Queen Mother Billings, for your guidance
you.
tonight. Thank you for getting
I
us.
was honored to be here with you. Now, when I get down into Kansas City, y'all know I want the real barbecue. I don't want that. I don't want what y'all give them tourists. I want that. I want the little hole in the wall, greasy spoon, sister with the big, that fat up under